Someone keeps moving things in my house at night. I first noticed something was off about 3 weeks ago. It wasn't anything major at first. A misplaced book, a slightly open cabinet door, easily explainable. I told myself I lived alone, but I was hardly the most organized person. Maybe I had left the book there, maybe I had forgotten to close the cabinet all the way. But then things started escalating. It was around midnight, and I was just about to drift off to sleep when I heard a faint sound. It was a soft thud, like something had fallen. I sat up, my heart thudding in my chest. I listened intently, but the noise didn't come again. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, the result of reading too many scaries before bed. The next morning, I found my coffee mug, the one I always left on the kitchen counter, in the middle of the living room floor. It was unbroken, just sitting there as if someone had carefully placed it. I laughed it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination once again. But each night, the sounds continued, a creak here, a shuffle there, and every morning I would find something out of place: my keys in the bathroom, my shoes in the refrigerator, and the most unsettling of all, my pillow on the kitchen table. I started losing sleep. Every little noise jolted me awake. I installed cameras in every room, hoping to catch whatever or whoever was causing this, but each morning when I reviewed the footage, there was nothing. The objects seemed to move on their own, out of view of the cameras. It was as if some unseen force was toying with. I confided in my friend Lisa about what was happening. She suggested it might be sleepwalking, but I had never sleepwalked in my life, and this felt too deliberate, too malicious to be a simple case of sleepwalking. One night I decided to stay awake, armed with a flashlight and a kitchen knife. I sat in the dark, listening to the eerie silence. Hours passed, and just as I was about to give up and go to bed, I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the hallway. My heart pounded as I slowly crept towards the noise. The closer I got, the louder it became. I reached the hallway and flicked on my flashlight. There in the middle of the hallway was my childhood teddy bear. It sat upright, staring at me with its button eyes. I hadn't seen that bear in years. I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the bear toppled over as if pushed by an invisible hand. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The hallway plunged into darkness, and I could hear the bear being dragged away by something unseen. I ran back to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on my bed, clutching the knife, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, I found the teddy bear sitting on my kitchen counter, a mocking smile stitched into its fabric. That was the last straw. I packed a bag and left the house, staying with Lisa until I could figure out what to do next. But even now, as I lie in bed at Lisa's place, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, and I know deep down that it won't be long before it finds me again. 2 days later, Lisa went out for groceries, leaving me alone in her apartment. I took this opportunity to check my emails, hoping for some distraction from my ordeal. As I scrolled through the usual flood of spam and promotions, one email stood out. The subject line read, "Someone keeps moving things in your house at night." My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated before opening the email. The message was short and cryptic. "I know what's happening to you. If you want answers, meet me at the old bookstore on Pine Street tonight at 11 p.m. There was no name, no signature, nothing to identify the sender. It felt like a trap, but curiosity and desperation got the better of me. That night, I made my way to the old bookstore. It was a rundown place, long abandoned, and rumored to be haunted, the perfect setting for a horror story. I thought bitterly. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the dim light from my flashlight barely pierced the darkness. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. There was no response. I ventured further into the store, my heart pounding in my chest. Just as I was about to turn back, a figure stepped out from the shadows. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure moved closer, revealing an elderly man with a weathered face. "I go by many names," he said cryptically, "but you can call me Gideon." "What do you want?" I asked, gripping my flashlight tighter. "I don't want anything," Gideon replied. "I'm here to help you. The disturbances in your home are not random, they are a sign. A sign of what I asked. My curiosity piqued. Gideon took a deep breath of a restless spirit, someone who has unfinished business in this world. I scoffed. Do you expect me to believe that my house is haunted? Believe what you will, Gideon said calmly. But the evidence is there. The disturbances, the feeling of being watched, the misplaced objects, it's all a manifestation of the spirit's presence. And how do you know all this? I asked suspiciously. Gideon sighed. Because I've encountered spirits like this before. They seek out individuals with a certain sensitivity. They latch onto them, hoping to find resolution. Resolution, I echoed. What kind of resolution? That depends on the spirit, Gideon explained. They might seek revenge, forgiveness, or closure. It's up to you to discover what they want and help them find peace. I shook my head in disbelief. This is insane. Maybe, Gideon said with a shrug, but ignoring it. Won't make it go away. If anything, it will only make things worse. I stood there grappling with the absurdity of the situation, but deep down I knew that ignoring the problem had only escalated it. All right, I said, finally, what do I need to do? Gideon handed me a small ornate box. Inside you'll find a set of items. Each one is connected to the spirit. In some way, use them to communicate with the spirit and discover what it wants. I took the box, feeling its weight in my hands. And if I can't help the spirit? Gideon's expression grew somber. Then the disturbances will continue, and the spirit's anger will only grow. But I have faith in you. You're stronger than you think. I left the bookstore with the box, my mind racing with questions. Who was this spirit? What did it want from me? And why had it chosen me? Back at Lisa's apartment, I opened the box. Inside there were 5 items: an old photograph, a lock of hair, a key, a piece of jewelry, and a letter. Each item seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle. I started with the photograph. It was faded and worn, depicting a young woman standing in front of a house. Her eyes seemed to bore into mine as if she were trying to tell me something. I turned the photograph over and found a name written on the back. Evelyn. On the back, Evelyn. Next, I examined the lock of hair. It was tied with a ribbon, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness as I held it. Who was Evelyn, and why had her hair been kept? The key was old and rusty, but it looked like it might fit a small lock. I set it aside for the moment and moved on to the piece of jewelry. It was a delicate locket, and inside there was a tiny portrait of the same young woman from the photograph. Finally, I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky and hard to read, but I managed to decipher it. It was a heartfelt plea from Evelyn to someone named Thomas, begging for forgiveness and expressing deep regret for something she had done. I pieced together the story as best as I could. Evelyn had wronged Thomas in some way, and now her spirit was seeking forgiveness. But how could I help her find peace? I decided to try communicating with Evelyn's spirit. I gathered the items from the box and placed them in a circle. On the floor, I sat in the center, holding the photograph and the letter. Evelyn, I said aloud, my voice trembling. I know you're here. I want to help you find peace. Please show me what you need. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a soft breeze stirred the air, and the temperature in the room dropped. I shivered, feeling a presence around me. The photograph in my hand began to warm, and I saw a faint light emanating from the locket. I opened it, and the tiny portrait seemed to come to life. The young woman's eyes filled with sorrow. Thomas, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I need to find Thomasu? I nodded, feeling a strange sense of determination. I'll help you find him, Evelyn, I promise. The light in the locket flickered and then faded, and the room returned to normal. I took a deep breath, knowing that my journey was far from over. I had to find Thomas and deliver Evelyn's message, but where to start? The photograph showed a house, and the letter mentioned a small town called Hawthorne, not far from where I lived. With a sense of purpose, I packed my bags and set off for Hawthorne the next morning. Hawthorne was a quaint, sleepy town that seemed frozen in time. The townspeople were friendly enough, though they eyed me curiously as I asked about Thomas. It didn't take long to track down someone who knew of him. Thomas had passed away several decades ago. He had been a reclusive man living alone in an old ivy-covered house on the outskirts of town. He was known for his quiet demeanor and was rarely seen in public. Most of the townspeople regarded him as a ghost of a different kind, alive but isolated from the world. I found the house easily. It was a dilapidated structure, overgrown with weeds and vines. As I approached, I felt a chill in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me. I pushed open the creaky gate and made my way to the front door. To my surprise, the door was unlocked. I stepped inside the floorboards, groaning under my weight. The interior was covered in a thick layer of dust. Untouched by time, it was as if Thomas had simply vanished, leaving everything behind. I explored the house, searching for any clue that might help me understand Evelyn's connection to Thomas. In the living room, I found an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. As I carefully flipped through it, I discovered that Thomas had kept detailed notes about his life, his regrets, and his undying love for Evelyn. The journal revealed that Evelyn and Thomas had been lovers, but their relationship had been fraught with tragedy. Evelyn had betrayed Thomas in a moment of weakness, and the guilt had consumed her until her dying day. Thomas, heartbroken and unable to forgive her, had lived out his days in solitude, haunted by memories of their lost love. With the journal in hand, I felt a strange sense of closure. I returned to Lisa's apartment, knowing that I had the key to unlocking Evelyn's peace. That night, I once again gathered the items from the box and placed them in a circle on the floor. I sat in the center, holding the photograph and the journal. "Evelyn," I said aloud, my voice steady, "I found Thomas's story. I know what happened between you two. I'm here to help you find peace." The air grew cold, and I felt a presence around me. The photograph in my hand began to warm, and the light in the locket flickered to life. The young woman's eyes filled with tears, and her voice echoed softly in the room. "I never meant to hurt him," she whispered. "I loved him so much, but my mistakes, they drove us apart." "I know," I replied gently. "Thomas loved you too. Despite everything, he kept a journal filled with memories of you. He never truly let you go." The light in the locket grew brighter, and I saw a faint outline of a figure, Evelyn's spirit, shimmering with sorrow and regret. "I need to speak to him," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "I need to ask for his forgiveness." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of empathy for the tormented spirit. "I'll help you. I promised we'll find a way to connect with Thomas." With a sense of determination, I took the locket and the journal to the cemetery where Thomas was buried. I found his grave, a weathered headstone marked with his name. I placed the locket and journal on his grave, hoping that this act would bridge the gap between the living and the dead. As the night descended, I felt a presence beside me. Evelyn's spirit appeared, her form glowing softly. In the moonlight, she knelt beside Thomas's grave, her eyes filled with longing. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion, "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please forgive me." For a moment there was only silence. Then a gentle breeze stirred the air, and I felt a warmth envelop me. I saw a faint, translucent figure of Thomas standing beside Evelyn, his expression one of sorrow and love. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice carrying on the wind, "I've never stopped loving you. I forgive you." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she reached out to Thomas, their forms intertwined, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The air grew still, and I knew that Evelyn and Thomas had finally found the closure they sought. As I left the cemetery, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The disturbances in my home had ceased, and the feeling of being watched had vanished. I knew that Evelyn's spirit had found peace, and Thomas's soul was at rest. From that day forward, I made it my mission to help other restless spirits find closure. I knew that my journey was far from over, but I faced each new challenge with a sense of purpose and determination. And as I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in weeks. I knew that I had made a difference, and that was enough for me.